name is Dr. Dwight Ratcliffe. I am the executive director for the William E. Pennell Center for African American Church Studies at Fuller Theological Seminary. And we are just so glad and so happy that many of you are with us this afternoon to join us in this series of conversations. We're going to be hosting a series of conversations on theology and protest. We've got 4 great, wonderful voices who are all leaders in the Black church, in Black community, and scholarship, and we're going to have some great conversation with them. Our format will be each week, I will just come on and say a few brief words of introduction, offer a prayer, and then, as I've learned from my sister, Janelle Austin, who will be with us in a couple of weeks, I will allow each speaker to self-introduce, to tell us about themselves, about their work, about what they're doing briefly. And then we'll get into some questions about their work and things that they're doing. And then we'll dig deeper into the theology that's behind it. I'm hoping and praying that these next few weeks, that today and the next 3 weeks, would really be an opportunity for us to engage with what's going on in our nation and in our world right now, to really talk about the nexus of theology and protest from various perspectives. And so we welcome you. Please give me a moment to offer a word of prayer. If you would join me in prayer, and then we'll jump right into it, because I know that your time is precious in the midst of everything else that's going on in our world. God, we thank you so much for just the privilege to be able to come together in the midst of this pandemic, to be able to come together virtually and to hear one another, to share. We bless our guests. We thank God for Dr. Reggie Williams being with us today, and for our guests that will be with us over the next 3 weeks. We bless and hollow out this time. God, we are reminded that when you appeared to Moses in that burning bush, you told him to take off his shoes because the ground he was standing on was holy ground. And God, so often we hear that as a mandate to take off our shoes and then enter into a holy place. But if we read that slowly, we hear that where Moses was already holy ground. He was already in the presence of the Almighty. And so we hollow out this space. We humble ourselves. We take off our shoes, as it were, because we recognize that we are in holy space, even right now. And so we are grateful to you, to what you will do through your Spirit by the work of your Son. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, we have with us this afternoon our first guest in a series of conversations, Dr. Reggie Williams. And just before he's going to self-introduce, just before he gives us a brief introduction of himself, I'm going to share something with him that I don't think he knows. I don't know if I shared this with you. I know when I was at Proctor, we talked a little bit on the phone, but I don't know if I shared this with you. But several years ago, when I was a student at Fuller, we had a class called African American Spirituality in the summer, and J. Alfred Smith was teaching the class. And J. Alfred Smith asked you to come in and just share a few words. And if you know anything about J. Alfred Smith, you know that the heart of that man is just immense. His heart and his insight is immense. And he said to me later that he brought Reggie in because he wanted some of our Black, especially our African-American students, to see a Black man with a PhD, because it meant something. And at that season, Dr. Ralph Watkins had left Fuller, and I had not yet thought about a PhD. I wasn't even in the cards for me. I'd just gone to Fuller because I wanted to be a better pastor. I just wanted to get my little master's degree and go pastor my church. And honestly, brother, it was seeing you. It was you being in the proximity where I could literally touch you. There was something about you being in the room, in that space, that really began to make me think, maybe I can do this. Maybe I should think about this. And so I don't think I've ever shared that with you, but I wanted you to know that in a very real way, no fluff, you have been an integral part of me even thinking about entertaining and having the courage to endure through a PhD program. So for that, I sincerely have an immense thank you for you, my brother. So take a minute and just self-introduce, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go deeper into your work, man. I didn't mean to throw you a curveball, though, but I thought you should know that.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
My God, man. Here's one of the things that folks know about me. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I really do. And it's just who I am. I don't have any way around that. Something like that hits me. It's my story, too. Thank you for sharing that. I remember that class. I remember that moment. And Papa Doc, as I call him, J. Alfred, also is a big heart. And if you remember when we were talking, he was crying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I remember well.
Yeah, that was my story. What you just shared was my story too, about seeing Black people with PhDs coming up in the academy through Westmont College. Through white Christian institutions, white theological institutions. It's very unlikely that we will see someone like us in front of the classroom. Highly unlikely. So when I was a master's student there, I had a class a theology and pop culture class, where we were required to visit to see something that was a program that was being held, and had a couple of professors, three black people with PhDs, and I thought, wow, this doesn't look so superstitious. And it was immediately following that class, I took another intensive with J. Alfred. And wow. J. Alfred pulled me out into the hallway. You know, those intensives go, pulled me out into the hallway and said to me, this is the last day of class, pulled me out into the hallway. I turned my paper in early. He read it that night, came back, pulls me into the hallway and says, are you in a PhD program? I didn't know, first of all, why he's taking me into the hallway. You know? And then secondly, what does he mean by this question? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, you need to be. You've got a PhD mind. If you don't do it, it'll be a mistake. And that's what pushed me into a PhD program. So then, he pushed me. Yes, sir. And then you saw me as a result of his efforts. He's that man.
Yes, sir.
So many powerful stories. Well, that's not what I wanted to share. You threw me that curveball.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. That really means a lot. You know what? My pastor emeritus out here, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, says you can't be what you can't see.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can't be what you can't see. So to have our bodies at the front of the classroom is an interruption in a story that predates our existence.
Yes, sir.
You know, that drives the way we see the world and people in it, the ideology of human difference that animates everything about where we live.
Yes, sir.
It interrupts that story.
Yeah.
So I'm Reggie Williams, Associate Professor of Christian Ethics at McCormick Theological Seminary here in Chicago. McCormick is in Hyde Park, right across the street from the University of Chicago. I'm a Christian social ethicist. Which means that I pay attention to the implications of our faith for our life in society, human flourishing, another way of thinking that through, what we mean by the moral as it pertains to the gospel and, day to day in society. I'm ordained in the Progressive National Baptist Church. I'm on the board of directors for the Society for the Study of Black Religion, which is my favorite guild of scholars. Also for the English language section of the International Dietrich Bonhoeffer Society. Those are two worlds that typically do not come together. They typically are not together. I've been on the board for the Society for the Society of Christian Ethics as well. I write about race. Got a book project I'm working on right now about the Harlem Renaissance, Black aesthetics as Christian social ethics. I've written about Bonhoeffer in the Harlem Renaissance. Got another text about Bonhoeffer working on interacting with the continued entanglement with whiteness that he struggled with in Nazi Germany. So, blah, 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 blah. That's me.
Yeah. I want to get to your work, but I think, at least for me and probably for several others that are watching this, man, can we riff just a little bit on that need and that importance for our Black bodies to be present in certain spaces? I think that's so important. Whether we're talking about this modern protest movement and the need to see Black Christian bodies, or whether we're talking about just in our institutions, I felt the same way. I had several. When I got ready, when I graduated with my master's, I had several of my Black mentors that all pushed me into a PhD program. But it was difficult going through that program and not seeing anyone like me in that program, teaching that program. It's really difficult for us to navigate spaces when we don't have that physical presence there. Man, can you say something else about that? That's powerful.
So everything in society tells us things about what's expected of us. There is no way to avoid being told what a person with your body should be doing. There's no way around it. Yeah. They see your body is seen, and there's something required. You can call it the performative. How does that body move? How should it perform? What is it capable of doing? Judith Butler in her book Gender Trouble talks about gender performance. To act male is not to act female, or the expectations of the butch female, or at least the implications of that, and so forth. She's talking about gender performance. There's the same concept around race. To act Black is not to act white, to talk Black, and so forth. What are these things that Black people are about in the world? What are the possibilities of Black body and Black movement, Black talk, Black speech, Black academia, Black intellectualism? These are elements of what I would describe as the field of aesthetics that comes online at the same time as the ideology of human difference is being created in the world in the context of the transatlantic slave trade. Aesthetics, in his book, Critique on Judgment, Immanuel Kant says beauty is the image of the moral. And if certain bodies are described as ugly, that's also saying something about moral, saying something about the way that body moves through the world and its capacity to be sovereign, self-possessed, governing it, to be in charge of itself. Now I bring those things up to say those are elements within the history of our understanding of our bodies moving in the world right now. What are you capable of, Black man, Black woman, Black person? What is your future? What should you be about doing? People in the academy, whether you're a student at a very good school or a professor, often perceived as taking the place of some otherwise more qualified candidate. Those are just general assumptions of your space in your body in that space. Yeah. General assumptions. When I walk into the classroom as a Black professor, when I just started, it took me a while to recognize that before I open my mouth, my body is already speaking to these students. They're already hearing what they believe will come from my mouth, and maybe even something about the rigor or the potential for learning something before I say a word. That it's like it's a script. We're all in a narrative with our roles given to us at birth.
Yeah.
And you can't help but learn about it. Everything around you is telling you what this thing is. And telling you about you. Everything around you is.
Yeah. Having, and I'm sure you yourself are also in the midst of doing Zoom calls like this and what have you. But some of the conversations that we're having, especially when I start having these conversations with non-Black sisters and brothers, it's trying to explain that a white child born has the freedom to dream to be whatever that child wants to be. A Black child in America is not given the same freedom to dream and to see the same things. And so that power of the physical presence. I said it, I posted something online the other day. I said, there's something about seeing President Barack Obama, seeing his image. There's something about his image that frees me in a powerful spiritual and prophetic way, that frees me to imagine more and dream bigger.
That's right.
For me. And
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Because it interrupts that classical aesthetic of what the potential is for Black people. is something other, is something different.
Yeah.
You're in the White House. Oh, I didn't know we could do that.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Right.
You know, I'd never heard that before. I didn't know that was possible.
Exactly.
But you are possible of a whole lot more than the script has for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, I play basketball. People expect that of me. So for me, as a basketball player in that white college, I'm not moving outside my role. I come back to that place as a professor. Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing.
Now you're taking...
That's not your space.
Yes, sir.
You're taking the space for some otherwise elite white mind.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You are a diversity hire.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's what they'll try and bracket it.
Yeah. Use that as a segue. Let's talk about what you're doing now. The work that you mentioned, a book project that you're doing now, but let's just talk about, tell me about what work you're engaging right now. It can be broad, and then let's narrow it into, in this particular season of this global protest movement. What are you working on? What are you thinking about? What are you speaking into?
Well, in general, so I might say that if I were to try and describe the project that I'm about in social ethics, maybe something along the lines of this. I work to recalibrate what it means to be human and to be Christian away from false ideals set in place by the Enlightenment. Recalibrating what it means to be human and to be Christian. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the Christian social ethics portion, which is not describing to people how they can be good people, but removing obstacles that prevent our ability to be together in community. The moral individual is stuck in categories of good, the good and the moral, that correspond with ideologies of human difference that are still problematic, that are very problematic. Some of those obstacles that prevent us from being together is your inability to actually know yourself and your potential. You're working according to a script. Sisters and brothers who think of themselves as just being good people, which is funny how the good, moral white person thinks of themselves as being good, moral white person stuck in the savior complex, making a way to save you. Those kinds of things. Those are all deeply problematic. So instead, that obstacle that keeps us from actually being with each other, from seeing each other, this is a project that I would say I'm about in Christian social ethics. So the first book was about Dietrich Bonhoeffer and time that he spent in New York, moving from what we might say a conceptual theological project that he had developed that was brilliant to concreteness in discipleship, to following Christ, following after Jesus. This happens to him after some time that he spends in New York with Black Christians during the Harlem Renaissance. I'm actually, I've got a second project that I was initially going to be looking at the way that liberation scholars, South Africa and Central America, accepted his project, but I've recalibrated that a little bit. There's another section of that I need to take a look at. So if at first he's interacting with Black Christianity in Harlem, when he comes back in the remainder of them in the church struggle and the second half of his life, I should say the latter end of his life, he's still wrestling with the continued entanglement in whiteness, as a mechanism that's disarmed or made Christianity in Europe incapable of handling its most significant problem up to that moment. So that's this project that I'm working on right now. Okay. In addition to a project on Black aesthetics as social ethics. So you've got what we understand as the human being set in place by practices centuries long of selling and buying Africans. Christina Sharp talks about today our existence in the wake of that centuries long practice. Wake is something that is the water after a boat. It's the ritual we engage after a funeral, after death before a funeral. Yeah. We are in the wake right now of the transatlantic slave trade. Aesthetics are part of that. In the Harlem Renaissance, they are engaging in a Black aesthetic, which is not a creation of a whole other category of rules for beauty, although some have that. I'm arguing actually that Black aesthetics is what we were just describing as Black people in the front of the classroom, an interruption. It's an interruption in the centuries long practice of white aesthetics. There's a scholar who I interact with in this text called this text is called Underrepresentation. It's a double entendre. Black people missing at that institution, underrepresented. But if you recognize what aesthetics does, aesthetics also sets up notions of what people are and can be. It represents people.
Yeah.
So white supremacy is an aesthetic that has you under representation.
Yes. Literally.
Okay. You are under representation. You exist in the process of, in the field of representation. What you are about is represented for you. And in the Harlem Renaissance, they are intervening in the practice of representation.
Yeah.
That's that project. I just had a set of essays. David Gushie and I just published a set of essays, finishing up the work of my mentor, Glenn Stassen. So that's Jesus and Justice, and it is a work that he was working on when he did not get to complete when he died. It's a book published by Orbis. It's just come out. So those are three different things. I'm also something more recently, even more locally.
Yeah.
When George Floyd was murdered, I wanted to sit down at my laptop and just yell on paper.
Yeah.
There's something that I still feel when talking about that, because I didn't want to watch the video. I was trying not to watch it, and then it was on CNN in my living room before I could get to the remote and change it. So I happened to see it. And that brother looked like everybody that, in the men's group where I speak on a regular basis here at my church that I love. These are my brothers. That ripped me up. And I wanted to sit down and just yell on paper. What I ended up doing was striking a more pedagogical tone. That essay is yet to come out. It's going to be in Christian Century. I wrote it the week he died. They have it, and they're building an issue with that essay. But I'm arguing for the way I understand white supremacy, for the definition that I have for white supremacy, which includes giving some history and some context to describing it. So that I'm waiting to put into people's hands so we can have a conversation about what it is and what it is not.
Yeah. Let me ask you, why do you write? Why do you whether it's the Bonhoeffer piece, the ethics piece, the aesthetics why do you write? What is it about that? What is that?
It is cathartic for me to have a place from which to speak, to yell. I wouldn't. That was with, by the way, I see a question here. That's with Christian Century. It's a public piece. Yeah, that'll be coming out. I have one other with them called Seeing Whiteness too. You're welcome. I write on the one hand because I really need to say this.
Got it. Yeah.
That's one. I've got to say this. On the other hand, I write to help people. Actually, I write from the context of a follower of Christ who is Black.
Yes, sir.
Me and Christ is Black. And what does that mean for how we engage Christian faithfulness in a world that is crafted by white supremacy? with the white Jesus. What that does is to bring to the surface the convictions that guide our daily lives. Because they're moving us. They're animating what we say and do, how we believe the structures should be, whether or not Christian protest is immoral and anarchy or faithful witness.
Yeah.
You bring this stuff to the surface. It is what we believe and what moves our bodies, what we describe as faithfulness and so forth, without seeing it, which is what the practice of writing does. We take it and you put it under pressure and bring the good stuff to the surface so we can talk about it. We can analyze it, change it if necessary.
Yeah.
That's why I write, and it is what I do. At least one of the forms of activism that I engage in is writing.
Yeah, as writing is a way for you to it's a form of activism, as you said, but also a way that your body is being moved, also a way that you are being moved to action. What is it about your Jesus, your understanding of the gospel, your theological conviction that tells you, Reggie, this is part of your calling. This is part of your purpose. This is part of what you should be doing. This is part of how you are called to move, or how you should move. Help me and our attendees, our audience, make that connection between there's Dr. Reggie Williams, who writes for part of his voice. He writes because he's compelled to move, but he also writes as a way of activism. And show us behind the scenes, take us behind the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, and show us where's that connection between what you think and feel and believe about God to pen on paper, to your activism, to your body being moved.
Yeah, in short, it's kind of the narrative of me trying to work out since I was a child what it means to be Black and Christian in the United States.
Yeah.
There isn't a separation. I've always wondered, what does this mean? One quick story can help make sense of this. I was in the 3rd grade in San Ramon, the only Black kid in a brand new elementary school, Walt Disney Elementary School. It opened up. Okay, Walt Disney Elementary School. The only Black kid there. We were attending a church in Oakland, California, and I'm hearing Brother Cook talk about in Sunday school with the flannel graph figures. Forgive 7 times 70. You remember those things?
Flannel graph, take me back, sir. Take me back.
Oh yeah. Flannel graph. And that stuff is one location only that you'll hear those things. You'll see that stuff. It's Sunday school. He's talking about forgiveness. I remember this Sunday morning, Sunday school session. Yeah. I'm 8. Okay. And I'm maybe an unusual 8-year-old kid trying to take this stuff seriously. I'm at Walt Disney Elementary School, and these kids, Scott and Philip, are really coming to school and telling me what their parents thought about Black people. But they're calling me the N-word. They're calling me spirit chucker, spook, coon. But in church, they're saying that Jesus wants you to forgive.
Wow.
Come on. Forgive.
Man. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I've got this concrete situation that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
That's wounding. I mean, forgiveness in that context means act like it's not there. Okay, and then they made up a reason on my way home from school to jump me. And forgiveness means don't fight back. Well, it took me to my adult years to forgive myself for not doing anything, for not fighting back. It took me into my adult years. You've probably seen this thing being passed around on Facebook. This song, Try Jesus, but don't try me.
Yeah. I feel you. Yeah.
Because I throw hands.
Yeah. Because you get these hands in Jesus.
You've seen that. Yeah. I mean, that's catharsis now, But at that time, being tried in that sense meant to take what the adults were giving me for what it meant to be Christian and just turn the other cheek to take it. Now I understand turning the other cheek in a different way. That's not something to ignore, but I understand it differently now.
Yeah.
As nonviolent resistance of evil, not non-resistance of evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working this stuff out. King became really important to me the very next year. I got a biography of Martin Luther King Jr. that I got from this library when I was in the 4th grade, still sitting on a shelf in my office. I never gave it back, but it was for a kid. I read that thing several times when I was a kid. King became very important to me then. So, I mean, I can, as I'm trying to make sense of Christianity for a Black child in the context of an overtly racist situation, this has just been the direction of my entire life.
Wow.
This is just what I do. So my faith is something that's very important to me. And what does it mean to have this faith when there are other people who have this faith who are harmful to me?
Yes.
I've never been somebody who has paid any attention to, and this is, I mean, you know, we're both Fuller alum. Evangelical has never been a label that's mattered to me. That's never been anything, it's never mattered to me at all. I've only been trying to be Christian, and I struck out on this journey on my own. As a kid, I mean, my mom took me to school. My family stopped going to church when I was a teenager, but I went back on my own looking for that place, looking for worship. So it's never been something which is why it was easy for me to not be associated with that at all, because I'm looking for answers to these questions, examining what it means to be a Christian. Somebody who's always mattered to me, meant a great deal, is Harriet Tubman. After I learned about King, I learned about Harriet Tubman. Did a major report on her when I was a junior in high school. Harriet Tubman is a Christian that is hard for white Christianity to make sense of. She is immoral. She is a lawbreaker, blatant lawbreaker.
Sir.
You know, she is a disruptor.
Yes, sir.
You know, how do you make sense of law-breaking, immoral disruption, you know, plundering the South of an economy and so forth?
Yes, sir. Yes,
by
sir.
faith.
By faith.
She says God sent her. God is guiding her.
Yes, sir.
They can't make sense of Harriet Tubman's God.
Yes, sir.
And neither can this nation make sense of the God that we serve, who is with us, not over and against us. This is a God in Christ who is with us on the cross. Whereas others want to make the predominant representation of Christianity wants to identify with him primarily risen with all power. We say he knows our suffering on the cross. What does that mean for those who are inflicting that suffering?
Yeah. Dude, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A piece, and let's take about another 5 minutes, and then we'll try to answer.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good.
But finish this sentence for me, because you got me going now. The God of Martin, the God of Sojourner, the God of Harriet, the God of Reggie. It's like what?
It went blank for is like what?
It's like what? Describe that God, that God, the God of Harriet, the God of Martin, the God of Reggie is like what? What is that God about? And of course, there's no way, I'm not trying to get you to summarize everything, but give me.
No. I know. The first thing that comes to mind is like a burning fire. The first thing that comes to mind, because that's what drives me on. I feel that fire. I feel the fire in the that's burning in the hearts of people who are in the streets for justice. Yes. You're not gonna put that out. And when you try to put it out by sending federal troops, it's like throwing oil throwing water on an oil fire.
Yeah, pretty much. If not,
it's like throwing water on that fire. This is a fire that will consume until it is no more hungry. It's no longer hungry, and we are hungry for justice. And this is a God of justice that's driving us on like fire.
Yeah, God of justice. I like
that's the first thing. I could think about that for a little bit. This God is God of justice, and justice is the other side of love. Love is about delivering. It's not only about how you feel about your neighbor. It's about delivering your neighbor from the systems and structures, from the injustices that harm. We do what we can to deliver because we know God delivered us. And this is the God of liberation who delivers. This God is justice.
Yeah.
It is a just God. Justice and love. You don't have just love without justice.
Yes, sir.
Justice is something that sets right things that are wrong. When we have so much, setting things right is about what justice is about. We got all these problems and these injustices, these harmful things, and you tell us to look for heaven. You ain't talking about justice. You ain't talking about God.
And you can't have and there are those, and we won't start name dropping, but there are those who have detached any social obligation from the meaning of the gospel. But I find it hard to honestly and genuinely love anyone and consciously subordinate, marginalize, and offend and hurt and wound that person that you love. That's not love. That's not a biblical love. That's not a love that any of us would define or want. So I think you're absolutely onto something, that justice is not this, and I think I want to say this, that justice is not this thing that we've added on to the gospel. Justice is not this thing it's not a lens that we use like the prosperity gospel to go back and interpret all of scripture, that the core, if that God is love, that there is something liberating and freeing and concerning about a genuine love. And we cannot profess and proclaim a love for neighbor that does not have a concern and an action for neighbor attached to that love. That's not love.
Yep, that's right. Amen. I love what I really, I've come to really appreciate the way Glenn Stassen there for Fuller, my dear Dr. Father, described love as the drama in 4 acts. When you look at the way that the Bible is the story of God's active work in history as displayed in the Bible. I pointed this out to him. He developed this definition of agape, the most used word in the New Testament for God's action in the world of love. This is also a story that you see at Mount Sinai, the most a pivotal moment in the Jewish narrative. It's a drama in 4 acts. Sees with compassion, does a deed of deliverance, invites into community with freedom and responsibility, and confronts those who exclude. This is the practice of God's activity in the world. Love is not primarily how you feel about somebody else. Love is what you do in response to God's call on your life to follow me.
Say that again. Say that one again.
Love is not how you feel about somebody. Love is your response to God's call on your life to follow me.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm going to bring Aaron in. Aaron, come on and join us. Aaron Samuel, our administrative coordinator for the Pinnell Center. We've got about a couple questions in the Q&A and in the Q&A queue. So would you throw a couple of those, or give us one for Reggie right now?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Dr. Williams and Dr. Radcliffe, for this incredibly powerful conversation. So for one of our attendees, he has asked, Dr. Williams, you mentioned aesthetics being present in white spaces and disruption. Those phrases bring to mind for me as a former basketball player as well, the process of Black athletes. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the protests of Black athletes, college and pro, including Kaepernick's protest. Where do they go next?
Where should they go next, or where do they go next? Yeah.
Where did they
I'll say this. I love that this is coming from another athlete.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. These positions that we have in society as athletes are ones that fit the role, fit the script for what we should be about. Wherever you are at, as a Black person, that's good for you to be in that position as the athlete. And white folks pay a lot to see us in those positions. You can represent. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to think that Georgetown University was all Black. You know what I'm talking about, right? I thought it was all Black. You go to Georgetown University, the Black people are on in the athletics, primarily. But for us, for Black athletes in that position to take a knee and to protest is also demonstrating to all of those young people who aspire to be in that position, who aspire to be playing on one of those teams, that your life matters.
Yeah.
You know, and that there's other things to pay attention to in society, in addition to that basketball, that football, that baseball, whatever. That when we say justice is something that you are owed, that speaks to the value of your life. I mean, you can look around you and pay attention then to the other things that are present within society that may be holding you back. Yeah. You know, we have in our mind an understanding of what it means to sound Black, you know, to act Black. And it's often that those things that sound Black, that act Black, are things that are handed to us. Constrict your potential. But when you hear the language. When you hear the language of justice, when you recognize that there is injustice present, that is a barrier to the full potential that you may have, and that there are people who you admire who are saying, "We see it too."
Yeah, and there's that factor that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Williams, about the disruption too. That this athlete has decided to disrupt the narrative that the only space they should occupy is the space of an athlete that fits a particular mold. And for me...
Shut up and dribble,
right? Thank you. I was trying not to say it. But for me also, in my work, what I find is that this also, when our athletes take this stand, it also disrupts, right, this Greco-Roman norm, this white aesthetic, as you put it, that says that we should separate certain things. And that's the response that we heard for Kaepernick, right? That we don't want protest entering into our sacred space of sports. That sports is supposed to be separate from and away from the politics and the protesting and this and that. And I think that if anything, the presence of a Black body needs to do in its disruptive presence is attest to the fact that as a Black body, I don't have the luxury of separating those things out of my life. That I can't separate my presence from the role that you've told me to fit into, from the life that I live, from my fears, from all of that is conflated into the existence of my Black life. So when I enter when I walk on the court, or I step onto the field, or as you said earlier, when I walk into the classroom, there's something about my existence that already speaks, and I don't have the privilege to be able to separate out, to live just as an athlete over here. I'm always a Black athlete. I'm always a Black professor.
That's right. So that the ticket that you would purchase, that person would purchase to come into the arena and see you, is a contract of sorts. That they will engage with you in this manner. And when you protest that life in its entirety for you is not safe, I want you to see the rest of me as well in this country. I want you, that's too much.
It is.
That interruption into the aesthetic is, don't bring all of that in here. Find another place to be you, but I want you to dance for me in this moment. I want you to catch that football for me in this moment. I want you to dribble for me in this moment. That's what I paid to see. Don't put all of that in front of me. If you don't like it, get out of here and go back to Africa or something. But in this moment, I want you to pay attention or uphold the contract that I've made with my cash that I paid to see you dribble.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Aaron, give us another one.
Yes. So another one of our attendees is actually also a graduate of Baylor University. And she is curious, what are some practical ways that Baylor has implemented a Black aesthetic? And also, what are some ways that Fuller can we calibrate and implement practically throughout the institution on every level, students, staff, faculty, not just in theory?
I don't know what Baylor has done since I've gone. I really don't know. That would be an interesting question to ask some of the folks who are there now, particularly as a professor who replaced me there. I have a great deal of respect for her. They are, I don't know. I wonder. That's a good question. What I would think, what I'd like for my alma mater to do, you got this brother, Dwight, I know, shaking stuff up with this series that we're doing, which is a good thing. But one of the things that's important for all academic institutions is think of it as it were the food that they serve when we're talking about the curriculum. You know, think of it as food. In other words, think of it as what we are describing as civilization and culture. To come into these institutions of higher learning is to be civilized, is to become encultured. You're going to repeat the sounds of a certain kind of these people who have been the creators of civilization, the creators of culture. And for you to be educated is to repeat their voices. That's it. You repeat these voices in this proper way, deemed appropriate by the gatekeepers of culture and civilization, and you're educated. You know, what if we call that what it is, a colonial narrative? What if we just call it what if we just call it for what it is? That the academy is about making appropriate citizens of the empire. And if we want to disrupt this process of making proper imperial subjects with its indigenous and its colonial, the indigenous are the people from the colony who are citizens of the metropole. What if we change stuff up a little bit here? What if we recognize that we are actually doing a colonial project, and we change the way that our curriculums are structured?
Yeah,
we which would mean, in often case in a lot of our institutions, means starting with the trustees, and then the faculty. Don't be afraid of shaking up your structures in theology. Why are all the Black and brown people on recommended lists if they show up at all?
Really?
We get all of these divisions of disciplines with the Jim Crow syllabi, meaning whites only, separated in such a way as to completely mimic the German or the British model for a colonial experience for their students.
Yeah.
What if we do something different?
Yeah. And I'm sure Dr. Williams, I'm sure you've never heard this response to why the Black and brown people always show up on the recommended list. It's because we're using the experts in the field, and all the experts in the field just happen to be white. Yeah, let's call it what it is, name it what it is, and challenge ourselves to move past that model. And so I was having a conversation with a few people, and I was telling them that we've been really in survival mode, just as an institution, and even the Pinnell Center, just trying to figure out what can be done with all the restrictions of the environment, the financial economy, all that stuff. And a couple of them just challenged me, like, but what would it be if you could dream? And what would it be? And I caught myself, listen to this, I caught myself spending time, I set aside a couple hours in the day to dream, to think. And I had to go back several days later. I looked at my notes and started talking through some things out loud. And I realized that even in my process of dreaming, I still restricted my dream to what I thought was feasible and could actually happen under current circumstances.
Yep.
And so what does it mean for us to really, as you said, to envision a system and and I hate to use the word institution because it's so loaded, but what does it mean for us to envision a system that operates or exists outside of what we've always known? And it's so hard for us to
it really is.
even imagine that.
It really is. And that's what we need to be about in the academy. I mean, in what we do, we need to be about the process of imagining. We've got to do, this is what we need to be doing. We need to be imagining. We need a safe place to imagine, to practice and to imagine other worlds, other modes of being in relationship, other ways of understanding ourselves. Yeah. You know, and I mean, this is one of the things. Christianity comes online as one of these kind of regulators of the colony, of the empire.
Yes.
This religious sanctioning of the status quo is a way of policing the borders and making sure that you don't imagine.
Yeah. It's 12:52. Aaron, give us one brief one, and then I've got a final question for Dr. Williams, so we can let him go. We got to honor his time as well.
Yes, sounds good. Someone wanted one of our attendees you to repeat your summary of the 4 phases of the acts of love read in Scripture.
Oh, yeah. This is Glenn Stasson's notion of delivering love. He said, I mean, he gets this from the story of the Compassionate Samaritan. Love sees with compassion, enters into the context of the beloved. Love does the deeds of deliverance. Love invites into community with freedom and responsibility for the future. And love confronts those who exclude. Love sees with compassion. The Compassionate Samaritan saw him, got off his donkey, went over to him. Love does the deeds of deliverance, poured in the oil and the wine, bandaged up his wounds. Love invites into community with freedom and responsibility for the future. He brought him into the community of the inn and offered to pay for him. He's got responsibility for the community too, this man, the one who was wounded. Love confronts those who exclude. Jesus is telling the story to Jewish people. Can you imagine if the place that you're waiting for, the kingdom that you're expecting, is inhabited by folks that you can't stand to be around? It's confrontational. It's also what happens on Mount Sinai.
Yeah. I love it. Dr. Williams, go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, can I tell you real quick, Dr. Williams, we've had a few attendees request a reference list of all of the books and articles and everything you mentioned. So just letting you know that email's coming. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, they want a full works cited after this, all right?
All right.
Let me ask you this, and this will be our closing thought, an opportunity for you to give us any closing words or thoughts that you have. But here's my question, my last question for you. Thinking and considering what Bonhoeffer's interaction with Black Christianity in Harlem has done for the trajectory of his theology, how might white evangelical Christianity in America, in this moment, in this particular moment, how might it learn from and hear from and be affected by, have its own trajectory changed by Black Christianity right now? Like, if you could see.
I say we get first as a kind of a negative, from the negative. Stop fearing or ignoring your body. Stop ignoring your body. Learn what it means to live in your body and what the story that you inherit from history tells you about that body and its potential.
Yeah.
Over and against my body, Black bodies, what embodiment means. Bodies carry the script. That's first thing. Black Christians, I love Baby Suggs' Sermon in the Clearing. Love your hands, love your feet, love your flesh. Over yonder, they don't love your hands. They just soon chopped off. They love your heart, above all guard. Baby Suggs from Toni Morrison's book, Beloved, the Sermon in the Clearing, about embodiment. Love your body. Love your body. Value it. What does it mean to recognize? This is what happens to theology once you recognize that you're in a body and Jesus came in the body. What does it mean? What does salvation mean for a person who can't even say that they have full possession of their body. What does salvation mean? What does salvation mean for a person who doesn't know where their next meal is coming from? These are the things that they're embodied, they're real, they're concrete, they're from Christ. They're God's activity in the world.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for being with us this week. As a friend and colleague, I sincerely appreciate your time. I thank you so much for our conversation today. For those of you that have been with us, thank you. Join us next week. Pastor Sam Casey of New Life Church will be with us. We thank you all so much for your time, and we pray God's blessings upon your life. God bless you.
Amen. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, sir.